To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
There's a debate going on in this country right now. Can we succeed as a nation where a shrinking number of people are doing really, really well, but a growing number are struggling to get by? Or are we better off when everybody gets a fair shot?
President Obama visits Boca Raton and highlights a theme he hopes will be a winner in the campaign.
Good morning and welcome to the Point. Michael Williams has the day off. President Obama raised an estimated $2 million for his campaign in the one-day trip to our area, where he also tried to set the tone for his fight against Mitt Romney. Will it work? That's what our guests are here to discuss today. Joining me, Eric Johnson, the Democratic political consultant, and also Jack Furnari, a Republican consultant and the president and CEO of the conservative website, BizPacReview.com. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
All right, let's get to the point. Will President Obama's message work here in Florida? Let's begin with you, Eric.
Oh, yes. I think the trip itself was fantastic. The speech he gave was a rousing speech. He was in perfect presidential form with a message that is going to resonate here in Florida and a lot of swing states, which is the very wealthy, the multimillionaires and billionaires need to pay their fair share, need to not be in a situation where they are now, where they're actually paying less than middle-class people. They're paying less than teachers and firefighters. That disparity that's been going on is something that really resonates with people, and I think he was right on message. I think you're going to hear it from here all the way out through November.
Except you might not hear that from Jack. What did you think, Jack?
Well, I thought the speech was frankly cynical and not worthy of a presidential speech. The Buffett rule, it was so sort of ridiculous that I thought he was talking about the Jimmy Buffett rule, and it was too many Margaritavilles. Margaritas in Margaritaville. The bottom line is it's not a serious speech. It's not a serious policy. It's a political gimmick designed to divide Americans. And I don't think people will buy it at all. And even the president yesterday admitted that it was a gimmick and that it really had nothing to do with deficit reduction.
Some might say it's class warfare. What do you...
Well, there is a class warfare, and that is the conservative Republicans have a class warfare on the middle class. They think it's fine to have tax cuts for the very, very wealthy and make sure that the middle class are paying more. Mitt Romney's tax plan will give the average millionaire a $250,000 tax cut. Romney himself, this guy's putting a car elevator in his home, is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, paid 13.9% income tax rate this past year. That's far less than we all paid. It's less than you paid, Jack. It's less than I paid. And meanwhile, middle-class people are paying much more. So the Buffett rule simply closes these tax loopholes that allows millionaires and billionaires to pay so much less. That's not class warfare. That's just fairness.
What's wrong with that, Jack?
Because it's just inaccurate and it's misleading. First of all, capital doesn't come out of the sky. You earn it. So you pay up to 35% to earn that money. Then you invest it in a corporation, and that corporation pays up to 35% in corporate income taxes. Then you get back a return on your investment, and it's taxed at a capital gains rate of 15%. To take in isolation the 15% and say that that's lower and ignore that it was taxed multiple times before that, it just isn't sound policy, and I don't think it's anything that the American people are going to buy. They understand math, frankly, better than the president does. So I don't think it's going to work. It affects far too few people. It's not a question of fairness. If you want to be fair, lower that secretary's tax rate. Why is the first instinct of the Democratic Party and this president to always want to raise taxes and spend more to be fair, rather than let's cut that secretary's taxes if you think they're too high?
Well, and back to the point of how much it's going to actually raise. I mean, about $5 billion a year, right? $48 billion over 10 years. Does that? I mean,
well, actually, you know, we started down this path with the Bush tax cuts that cost the country trillions in tax cuts to the wealthiest 1%. We have then been pushed into keeping those extended. We're going to wind up spending another $1 trillion in the tax cuts that were passed under the Bush administration. It's a serious amount of money. And when we are trying to cut the deficit, you can have an approach like Mitt Romney's where we're going to continue with tax cuts for the very wealthy and instead go get that deficit reduction by cutting deeply into Social Security and Medicare, or we can get to a point where everyone's going to pay their fair share. It's a big starting point. The question you asked was whether this was going to work. It is working because people agree with it. The president is currently up on Mitt Romney in the swing states. They took a poll of recently, several different polls of swing states throughout the country. He's up in North Carolina. He's leading amongst independent women by 14 points. This is one of the key issues.
And it is a popular one, definitely. And I think the last poll I saw was 6 of 10 Americans want the rich to pay more, want them to pay their fair share. But is it really going to end up being anything? I mean, can it, get all the way through the Senate? I mean, the House has its first, really, where's it going?
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. How you get anything through a divided Senate and House is very, very difficult. The Republicans in the House are going to block any measure that taxes an extra penny on anyone who is making more than $1 million a year. They're going to fight that. And that's why this election is so important. That's why elections have consequences. It's not enough to just return Barack Obama to the presidency. We have to have we're going to have a Democratic Senate and have a Democratic House to be able to have some fair, equitable tax policies in the United States. When you have the fighting and the obsession, I know we might be talking about it later, but when you have the kind of divisive members of Congress that make it impossible to get anything done, you're not going to get Mitt Romney or Barack Obama's tax policy passed.
So what is the solution?
Well, I think there's a certain collective amnesia with the Democratic Party, led by the president. They had the House, they had the Senate, and they had the presidency from 2008 to 2010. If the Buffett rule was such a solution, why didn't they enact it when they could have? And if the Bush tax cuts were so bad, why didn't they end them when they had all 3 branches of government? And why did the president in December of 2010 continue the Bush tax cuts? Even in practice, even the Democrats realized that raising taxes on the job creators is not a way to get the economy moving. And if people don't have jobs, what the American people want are jobs. They don't want a handout. And, frankly, to go to a college and tell 4,000 students that he's going to take money from them and more in student loans, it was just pandering and divisive politics, and it's not going to work.
It wasn't just a campaign speech?
It's a policy speech, and that's what the president, and it is, the campaign has definitely begun. I mean, with Rick Santorum out of the race, and this is now a 2-person race between Mitt Romney and the president, so every policy speech is also a campaign speech. We're going to be talking about the issues that are going to decide this election and the policy we're going to have for the next 4 years. And tax policy is a critical one. This is something that he should be talking about. And the disparity between the middle class and the wealthy and their tax rates is absolutely something he should be talking about.
Can I interrupt one thing about this middle class? There was a study I read today. It's in my briefcase, but it's not the forum to go through it, released by Cornell. And a lot of the president's message on stagnant middle income, income for middle class Americans, is based on a flawed study that says it's 3.6% since 1979 to 2007. And what it really turns out to be is middle class income grew over that time period 38%. That a lot was left out of the study. It was inaccurate. So this constant notion, everyone got richer over that period of time, all income groups. So this notion that the middle class lagged behind when times were good, all income groups made money, is just not accurate. It's an inaccurate statement.
I don't think America feels like everyone has got richer. You talk about the 2 years the Democrats and all 3 branches.
Like they have enough money.
For many, the Republicans had the presidency, the House, and the Senate under George Bush. Not only did not everyone didn't get richer, the economy tanked, and only the multimillionaires got richer. I don't know of anyone who feels that way, and it's because I don't think that's true. I think the middle class have taken a hard hit.
And with some of the,
now.
Right.
When you don't have a job, it's awful difficult. And long-term unemployment, you've got 8.2% as the official number. But if you look at the U6 numbers by the Bureau of Department of Labor, unemployment is at 14.5%.
For the underemployed, those who have given up looking for a job.
That counts people who haven't looked for work in over 4 weeks. So if you take that number and add it to the unemployed number, these are historical highs. That number has always been available, but it's never been more than a 1 or 2% spread between unemployment, the hard unemployment number, and those who have stopped looking for work and are long-term unemployed. Now it's at a 7% spread. It is unprecedented since the Depression. And instead of talking about taking from one group to try and give to another, I would like to hear what the president's plans are to create jobs.
Of course, that is the plan. The Mitt Romney plan is to take from a group and give to another. It's to take from the middle class, it's to take from Social Security and Medicare, it's to take from the social safety net, and then to give that in an additional average $250,000 tax cut for millionaires. That is the class warfare. That is the taking from one group to another. And I totally agree. The economy is still on a slow recovery, but is recovering thanks in large part to the jobs, to the Recovery Act, and to the stimulus bill that the president passed when we had those 2 years of Congress.
I want to move on to another topic real quick before we run out of time. Congressman Allen West said he believes there are between 78 to 81 members of the Democratic Party who are members of the Communist Party. He then said he was referring to the Congressional Progressive Caucus. What did you make of the comment?
In full disclosure, I work with Patrick Murphy, who's running for Congress against Allen West. It's comments like this that is going to be the reason Patrick Murphy beats Allen West. What I think this is, it's an outrageous comment. It's extremely divisive. Allen West has a history of making comments like this, of attacking fellow members of Congress, which make it impossible for him to reach across the aisle and ever work with other members of Congress to get things done. Those 80 members, roughly 80 members of the Progressive Caucus that he says, literally said were members of the Communist Party. These are people who've served the country, who have fought communists. These are people who just have, the Progressive Caucus has mainstream, it's almost half the Democratic caucus in Congress. Very mainstream ideas and mainstream policies. He's saying they're card-carrying communists. It's really a shame that it's gotten this bad. Every time this guy opens his mouth, he embarrasses the institution of Congress in South Florida.
Jack, will let you respond to that.
Well, A, that's not what he said. Clearly, when you see his remarks in the full context, he was referring to the Progressive Caucus. And
are they communists, the Progressive Caucus?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. First of all, I let you finish, so let me finish.
Oh, sure.
Okay. No, they're not communists, but when you speak as much live and do as many town hall meetings, it was a poor choice of words.
Mistake.
It was a poor choice of words, but to say that the progressive, the liberal progressive caucus in Congress is mainstream isn't accurate either. And
but communist is such an inflammatory word. I mean, you can't allow that to come out of your mouth without expecting then people are going to give some pretty big backlash.
Well, and obviously there is, but it's also, you have to put it in context. He was asked that question. He probably should have modified what he said, but it was obvious he was talking about the Progressive Caucus. And sometimes when you're talking live, not everyone is every single day. I mean, I've never seen anyone speak live and meet with his constituents as much as Congressman West has. And
not the first time he said anything controversial, though, either.
Well, Patrick Murphy, called an American lieutenant colonel a coward for changing districts. So I think when it comes to faux pas, everybody has their share of them.
And we're going to end it on that. Thank you very much, Jack Bernari and Eric Johnson, for being with us today. Nice. We'll have them both back because certainly they make interesting roundtable talk. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment with a look at this week's political news. Now for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and George Bennett, the political reporter for the Palm Beach Post. Thank you both for being here.
Pleasure.
George, you were one of the fortunate, you were one of the pool reporters during the president's visit to Palm Beach County this week. Tell us a little bit, tell us things we wouldn't know that only you would know, because you were one of the few that got to really go to every stop and see behind the scenes.
Sure. Well, one thing is, from now on, when I drive on Interstate 95, I want to have the whole road shut down and a police escort.
A lot easier, right?
Great way to get around. You know, it's just fascinating to see the president, any president, just the logistical stuff that goes into moving him around, and all the people involved and hustling him in and out of places. And so I went to a fundraiser he did up in Palm Beach Gardens, and then down to the FAU speech, which was public, and then he did another fundraiser down in Miami-Dade. You know, so he's talking to big donors in a small setting, about 60 people. You know, what he said to them is not much different from what he says publicly, and just that he's looking forward to a tough election and trying to recapture some of the enthusiasm he had in 2008 from his supporters.
And I know you've been a pool reporter for President Bush, President Clinton. I mean, so like you said, any president, it's just to see it up close like that.
Yeah, it's quite an undertaking. I didn't realize how many motorcycle cops there are in South Florida. I mean, just,
they were all out.
Right, every one of them. Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with George completely. It's easy for us in the media and academia to get a little jaded, a little cynical, or to try to, maintain some degree of objectivity. But it's always exciting, irrespective of the political party, irrespective of whether you like or don't like the president. When the president visits the town, the president brings his home court advantage with him. By that, I mean Air Force One is formidable when it lands. When the Beast, the presidential limo, pulls up and the motorcade pulls up, it's formidable. When you have cops flying flags and leading in, no matter who gets out of the car, it creates a home court advantage, and there's a buzz. The thing that was most exciting for me, and we all saw this there, was you had several thousand college students. Probably the last time they were enthusiastic about politics was the 2008 campaign, or maybe never. They were jumping up and down with excitement.
Well, and that brings up a good point, Robert, that he went to the students for support. That was largely a student audience that greeted him at FAU. But he went to the adults, the grown-ups, for all the money, and collected a couple million while in town.
Well, it sure wasn't going to go to the students for money, nor the professors, by the way. But, when you're speaking to a group of students, whether it's middle school, high school kids, or college students, as they often do, the press, your critics, tend to cut you a little bit more slack, because everything you do seems to appear to be reaching out for civic engagement. The president sandwiched that in between two high-profile fundraisers, as George said a moment ago. You could say, what about the timing of that? Was it pure politics? But when you're speaking to college students, it cuts you a lot more in terms of leeway. Part of the president's message was investments in education and student loans, so that makes sense. And this is a very important demographic. He carried big time in 2008. He's going to need the youth vote to come out in 2012.
Well, just like Eric Johnson said, it was a policy speech. Jack Vernari was like, nah, it's a political speech.
No, it was pretty political. I mean, he's calling it the Buffett rule, but it's really the Romney rule. I mean, it is. They want to draw attention to the fact that Mitt Romney's a rich guy. He paid a low effective tax rate. It's kind of policy by anecdote, because if you look, I mean, Warren Buffett, and there are rich people that pay these low tax rates in the teens, but on average, if you look at the CBO or nonpartisan data, on average, the top 1% are paying a much higher tax rate than the people in the middle class. But it makes a powerful story when you can say Warren Buffett is paying a lower rate than his secretary.
Right. Yeah, I think it was both. It was clearly political, and the general election begins. So it was clearly political, but there's also some policy elements. Cynically, you can say there's no way this so-called Buffett rule is going to pass, because the Republicans in the House are simply not going to allow it to pass and allow Obama to claim a big victory right before an election or raise taxes during an election. But we need to remember at the same time that many major policy efforts over the years, they don't pass the first time they're introduced. You need a public agenda. You need a conversation around the office water cooler, around the copy machine. And, this week, I think people around the copy machine are sitting around, in addition to talking about Trayvon Martin, are saying, hey, what about this Buffett rule? What do you think our boss is paying in taxes? So I do think it was a little bit of both.
I don't think he cares if it passes. He wants to raise the issue. I mean, he knows it's not going to pass, but he wants to raise it as an issue.
Sure, because it's smart politics. And even if it were to pass, it's not going to solve the budget deficit or debt woes. But there was an interesting number. George is right. Many millionaires do pay a higher rate, but many of them do not. There was a number in 2009, 2010, the average tax rate of people making over $10 million a year, they're paying at 22%. Which is, below what we pay.
Can I get a very quick comment before we go to break about the comments that Alan West made about calling members of the Democratic Party communists? What? What was your takeaway? With his then, it kind of retracted what he said. Put it in context, he said.
Well, yeah, what he said was that it was semantics, that maybe he wasn't literally saying they're part of the Communist Party, but that their agenda of the Congressional Progressive Caucus is, you know, akin to that. I think, I mean, Alan West has said so many controversial things. I mean, to some extent, there's a kind of built-in factor.
It's like, oh, Alan said it.
I mean, it's interesting that not only are the Democrats trying to raise money off it, but West has a fundraising appeal out saying, protect me from the distortions of the liberal media. So
do the people of Martin County know what's about to hit them?
I think he's pretty well known just as a national figure there. So
yeah, I think George is right. For every person that's turned off by this, remember, Alan West raises most of his money outside the district. He's got a loyal following on the far right from all around the country. Money's going to come in from, I don't know, Utah or Alabama for every dollar that might not come in from Martin County. Or,
all right,
so,
we'll be back. I got to pause right there. Sorry, we'll be back to wrap it up in a moment. And our thanks to George Bennett, to Robert Watson, and we thank you for joining us today. Have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.